Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for joining us for this Cricket South Africa Level 1 umpiring course hosted by Western Province Cricket Umpires Association. My name is Abdullah Steenkamp and my co-presenter for this evening is Thomas Mukarosi. Our usual format, I'll kick off and I'll cover laws 12, 13, 14 and 15. Then I'll pass the baton over to Tom, who will then cover laws 16, 17, and 18. And after that, we will open the floor for questions and answers. Just give me a sec. So law 12 covers the start of play and when is the cessation of play. Taking into account, we're covering the laws of cricket, which deals with more day cricket and let's say or more than one innings and test match cricket as an example. And I'll often refer to a test match just to illustrate how the law works. So when it comes to the call of play, so if you can visualize the test match starting at 10. So what happens at 9:55? The umpires will take the field. Then the fielding side will take the field. Then the two batters will take the field. Fielding side will then set out the field. Batters will ask the guard. Once the batters are ready, fielding sides are ready, umpires will confirm with the scorers if they are ready. As soon as everyone is ready, the umpire at the bowler's end will then call play. So this happens at the start of the game. It also happens after every interval or interruption. So let's say our lunchtime is at 12 o'clock. At 12:40, play will resume after lunch. Same procedure. At 12:35, fielding umpires will take the field, then the fielding side, then the batters. After everyone's ready, at 12:40, the bowlers in umpire will then call play. So that indicates the start of play or the start of the session. So how do you end the session? How do you end the day's play? How do you, if an interval has now arrived, how do you end the session? Or if there is an interruption, how do you end play? By the call of time. And also the bowlers in umpire then needs to call time when the ball is dead, on the cessation of play at the end of the day, or before any interval or interruption, or also at the conclusion of the match. Just one example, in our test match, starting at 10, our lunch is at 12 o'clock. The sixth ball of the over gets bowled. Umpire look at his or her watch. They see it's 12 o'clock. Umpire will then call over, time, and lunch. So as soon as the umpire calls time, the law wants the bails to be removed from both sets of wickets. So again, in our test match, and I'll use lunchtime as an example. Our watch says it's 12 o'clock. Sixth ball of the over gets bowled. Umpire will then call over, time, and lunch. What now needs to happen is both umpires needs to remove both bails from both set of stumps. So as soon as time is called, you need to remove the bails from both wickets. Starting of a new over. So again, in our test match, I'll use the first session as an example. Day 1 starting at 10 and our lunchtime is at 12 o'clock. So between 10 o'clock and 12 o'clock, the fielding side needs to bowl as many overs as they can. But there are times when, let's say you get, we know our lunch is at 12 o'clock. At 11:59, the sixth ball gets bowled. Now you look at your watch, you see it's 11:59. It's like 1 minute to go till your lunch interval. So the law tells us, because it's 11:59, we haven't reached our scheduled lunchtime yet, which is 12 o'clock. We need to start a new over. But the law guides us further by saying, so it's 11:59. The bowlers in umpire then calls over. So now, for a new over to be started, the umpires now needs to walk at normal pace, especially the strikers in umpire. Now needs to walk at normal pace towards the bowler's end. If the strikers in umpire gets to behind the bowler's end wicket before 12 o'clock, a new over needs to be started. If the strikers in umpire, by walking at the normal pace, does not get to behind the wicket before your watch turns 12 o'clock, you will then need to call lunchtime, time and lunch. So walking at normal pace, and if you get there before 12 o'clock, start a new over. If you don't get there before 12 o'clock, you then call time and lunch. When it comes to the completion of an over, if the agreed time for the interval is reached during the over, you need to complete the over first. So let's say our lunchtime is at 12 o'clock. So you look at your watch, you see it's 12 o'clock, but you only bowled 3 balls in the over. Do you take lunch? No. The law tells us you first need to complete the over. And after the completion of the over, now you take your interval, whether it's your tea or your lunch interval. So you first complete the over, then take your interval. There is an exception. And what is that exception? If when less than 3 minutes remain before your interval, either a batter gets dismissed or a batter retires. If that happens during the over, now you will take your interval. I'll use an example to illustrate what the law is trying to tell us. Again, our test match, our lunch is at 12 o'clock. At 11:58, it was now the end of the over. Can we take lunch? No, we cannot take lunch because there's still 2 minutes to go. So now we'll start a new over. Bowler then bowls a ball. And on the second ball of the over, the bowler takes a wicket. So you look at your watch and you see it's 11:59. It's not 12 o'clock yet. So can you take lunch? So now this is where point number 2 gets activated. If it's less than 3 minutes to go to your agreed time for your interval, like in our case, there's 1 minute to go and a batter was dismissed, you will now take lunchtime. But it must be less than 3 minutes to go. So our lunchtime will then now be from 11:59. And when should the first ball be bowled after lunch? If a lunch is 40 minutes long? Correct. At 12:39, the first ball needs to be bowled. But you can only activate clause 2 if there's less than 3 minutes. So just another example, if our wicket, with our lunch being at 12 o'clock, if the wicket falls at 11:56, will we take an early lunch? No, we will not, because now we cannot activate clause 2 because it's not less than 3 minutes to go to your interval. Now the new batter needs to come in and face the remaining deliveries, and you'll play up until 12 o'clock. The last hour of a match and the number of overs. We will deal with the last hour in much more detail for those of you that's going to join us when we do our level 2 and our level 3. But just to briefly explain this concept of the last hour and what happens in this last hour. So in our test match that spans over 5 days with play starting at 10 and ending at 5. So on day 1, start at 10, end at 5. Same hours for day 2, starting at 10, end at 5. Similarly, day 3 and day 4 and day 5. So, but now the last hour of the match is on day 5. So this last hour is from 4 o'clock until 5 o'clock on day 5. And here the law wants a minimum of 20 overs to be bowled in this last hour. So in our test match, day number 5, when we reach the last hour, which is, seeing that our cessation time is at 5 o'clock, our last hour will be from 4 o'clock up until 5 o'clock. And the fielding side needs to bowl a minimum of 20 overs in the last hour. That's just a brief explanation of how the last hour works and the number of overs that needs to be bowled in the last hour. We will go into much more detail when we do level 2 and level 3. When is the match concluded? When is the match at an end? So the match is concluded, firstly, as soon as the result is reached. And we will get to the result in Law 16. Tom will handle it later this evening. Example, South Africa needs to score 305 to win in their second innings. They get to 305. So for, let's say, the loss of 4 wickets. So as soon as the score 305 is reached, the match is then concluded. The match is at an end. The match is also concluded as soon as both the minimum number of overs in the last hour and the agreed time of play has been reached. We just in the previous slide spoke about the last hour, which is from 4 o'clock till 5 o'clock, where a minimum of 20 overs needs to be bowled. So as soon as the 20 overs is bowled and we've reached our cessation time of 5 o'clock in the last hour, the law now tells us that match is also concluded. Match is also concluded if in an agreement under law 13.1, as soon as the final innings is completed. In the next law, we will go into this in a bit more detail. We will see what is meant by if there is an agreement under law 13.1 when the game is also concluded. So just bear with me. We'll get there in a slide or two. Also, the game is concluded if a result is not reached, we haven't bowled our minimum number of overs in the last hour, nor reached our close of play time, nor we've reached any agreement that was made under law 13, and then players needs to leave the field due to adverse conditions, let's say example rain, and they left the field and does not come back on, no further play possible. That means game is also concluded. Just one example, South Africa needs to score 305 in their second innings to win. We on day number 5. We're in the last hour. We've bowled 5 overs into the last hour. And South Africa is on 254-2. So they haven't reached the target score of 305. We're only 5 overs into the last hour when it starts to rain. And then it rains and no further play is possible. So this is an example of as soon as we've reached 5 o'clock, no further play possible. Target hasn't been reached. South Africa hasn't been dismissed. The game will then be concluded. When it comes to the number of innings, and again, we're focusing on more day cricket, on more innings matches. An example of this is test matches. So in test matches, it's 2 innings per side. We can find matches that's 1 innings per side, but I'll use, and the law caters for that. So the law tells us a match can be 1 or 2 innings per side, according to the agreement reached before the match. But in test match cricket, it's 2 innings per side. The law then allows you to agree to limit any innings to a number of overs or to a period of time. In test match cricket, there are actually no limitations. So your first innings and your second innings, there's no time limitation, there's no over limitations. But there are competitions around the world, And in Cape Town, a few years ago, while we still played more-day cricket or two-day cricket, we actually had a limitation on the first innings where the playing condition states that 60 overs maximum you are allowed to face in your first innings for both sides. So the playing condition put a limitation to the amount of overs for the first innings. So the law allows for that. Also, the law allows for, if you say first innings only 3 hours. Once the 3 hours is completed, your first innings is done. So the law allows for these type of agreements to be made. And if you do make those type of agreements in a one innings match, a similar agreement needs to apply to both innings. So if it is a one innings match and you say it's 60 overs per side or 80 overs per side, both needs to then face 80 overs. You cannot say side A, you get 60, side B, 80. No, needs to be similar amount of overs. Also, in a two innings match, similar agreements to apply to either the first innings of each side or the second or both. To go back to my example here in Cape Town, the playing condition states that a max of 60 overs per side in the first innings. There was no limitation on the amount of overs in the second inning. So that was the agreement. 60 overs, first innings for both sides, no limitation in the second innings. So the law is flexible. It allows for these type of agreements to be made, but it needs to be done before the game starts. And usually the governing body of cricket for the particular competitions, they would put these type of playing conditions in place. In a two innings match, like our test match as an example, the law wants each side to take their innings alternately. There are two exceptions. We're going to get to those later this evening when I cover law 14 and law 15. But the law wants the innings to be taken alternately, meaning, let's say, India is playing Sri Lanka in a test match. So Sri Lanka batted first. Let's say gets dismissed for 300. India then needs to go bat. After that, they gets dismissed. Then Sri Lanka go bat again, and then India go bat again. So usually, innings is to be taken alternately. There are exceptions when it comes to follow-on and forfeiture, but we'll get there in later this evening. So when is a side's innings completed? And this should not be confused with when a match is concluded, which we've covered a few slides ago. This covers when an innings is completed. Let's say South Africa's first innings or any innings. When is an innings completed? First instance, an side's innings is completed when a side is all out. Usually when 10 wickets are taken, side is all out, innings is completed. Second instance, when an innings is completed, at the fall of a wicket or the retirement of a batter, there are further balls to be bowled, but there's no further batters available to come in. Also, innings completed. Innings is also completed when a captain declares the innings closed. Innings is also completed when a captain forfeits the innings. And just bear with me, we'll deal with declaration and forfeiture in later slides. And lastly, innings is also completed, and we just spoke about earlier, when you do put a prescribed number of overs to, let's say, the first innings, like here in Cape Town, where we had a max of 60 overs on your first innings. So as soon as that 60 overs is reached, innings is completed. Or similarly, if you put a time limit to an innings maximum 3 hours, as soon as you've reached 3 hours, that innings is then completed. When it comes to the toss, let's see who needs to be there, where, and timings as well. So the law in terms of the toss wants the captains to be present and at least one of the umpires. Preferably both umpires needs to be present, but if both is not available, at least one. So who needs to be present? Both captains and at least one umpire. Where does it need to take place? On the field of play. Anywhere on the field of play. So where's on the field of play? Anywhere across the rope. If you can visualize the boundary being a rope, as soon as you put your foot over the rope, you're inside the field of play. So the law tells us toss can take place anywhere on the field of play. As long as it's inside the field of play, you can take the toss there. But customary or traditionally, where does the toss take place? Usually next to the match pitch. That's just custom. That's a tradition for many centuries. That's where the toss takes place. But in terms of where, law just tell us anywhere on the field of play. So we now know who needs to be there, where it needs to take place. So what are the timings of the toss? There is a window period for the toss to take place. There's a 15-minute window period. So what is this 15-minute window period? Let's use our test match as an example. Day 1, starting at 10 o'clock in the morning. So the window period for the toss to take place is anytime between 9:30 and 9:45. So you'll usually see 9:30, captains will come down to the toss. So just to recap, who needs to be present? Captains and at least one umpire. Where? On the field of play. Timing, 15-minute window period. If it's a 10 o'clock start, anytime between 9:30 and 9:45. So can you toss 9:35? 9:30 and 9:45. So can you toss 9:35? Of course you can. Can you toss 9:40? Yes. 9:38? Of course you can, as long as it's within that window period. So as soon as the toss is completed, the law wants the captain that won the toss to notify his or her opposition whether they're going to bat or field. They cannot tell you, yes, I've now won the toss. Just give me 5 minutes. I first want to discuss it with my teammates or my coach. Then I'll get back to you, umpires and opposing captain. No. The law wants, as soon as that captain that won the toss needs to immediately notify his or her opposition or opposing captain whether they're going to bat or bowl. And once notified, that decision then afterwards cannot be changed. I mentioned earlier about the follow-on. So in the laws, they allow for the following. They allow for a side to follow on, and this option to follow on is available to the captain. Doesn't have to exercise this option, but it is available. And let's see what this concept of follow on is and when you're allowed to follow on or to not follow on. So in a 2 innings match of 5 days or more, and let's use our test match as an example, the side which bats first and lead by at least 200 runs, that captain will have the option of asking the other side to follow on. Let me use 1 or 2 examples to illustrate what the law is trying to tell us. So let's 5-day our test match as an example, which spans over 5 days. And if it's a 5-day test match, these days we don't have more than 5-day test matches anymore. And I know 60, 70, 80 years ago, they still played more than 5 days. But these days, test matches spans over usually spans over 5 days. So let's use India and Sri Lanka as an example to illustrate how this follow-on works and when a captain can exercise this option of asking the other side to go bat again. So India go bat first. India scores 600 for 5. Or let's say they get dismissed for 600. So 600 all out. Sri Lanka now goes into bat. India dismiss Sri Lanka for 350 runs. So now you need to ask yourself the question, now what the law tells us, if a side leads by at least 200 runs, the captain has the option to ask the other side to go bat again. So in our example, with India scoring 600 and Sri Lanka being dismissed for 350, so what is the lead? The lead is 250 runs. So because the lead is 250 runs, because the law wants the lead to be at least 200 runs, the captain of India has the option to ask Sri Lanka to go bat again. The option is there. Captain does not have to exercise the option. So if the captain decides to exercise the option of asking Sri Lanka to go bat again, Sri Lanka will then have to go bat again in the second innings. If the captain of India does decide not to exercise the option or not to enforce the follow-on, no issue. The captain of India can go bat again in the second innings. But the important thing I want you to take away from this is the lead needs to be at least 200 runs. So in our first example, the lead was 250. Another example, again, say India scores 5, bat, 5 gets dismissed for 500 in their first innings. Sri Lanka goes into bat and they dismiss Sri Lanka for 301. Now the captain comes to you and say, I want to enforce the follow-on. What is your response going to be? So this is a test match. The lead needs to be at least 200 runs. So what is our lead? With India scoring 500 and Sri Lanka being dismissed for 301. The lead is 199. So can India enforce the follow-on? No, they cannot, because the lead being 199, the law wants the lead to be at least 200 runs for the follow-on to be enforced. Not all more-day games spans over 5 days. Like in South Africa, we do have our provincial cricket spans over 4 days. That's both our Division 1 and our Division 2 sections. We also have a Colts division, and their match spans over 3 days. So now the same principle will apply in these games when it comes to what the lead needs to be. The only difference here is because the duration is shorter, 3 or 4 days, the lead needs to be at least 150 runs if it's a 3 or 4 day game. If it's a 2-day match, the lead needs to be at least 100. And if it's a 1-day match, and don't get confused, this 1-day match does not refer to a 50 over white ball cricket or T20. No, it's a 1-day match where sides play 2 innings matches. There the lead needs to be 75 runs. So the same principle applies as the examples that I used in point number 1. Just the difference is in 5 days, the lead needs to be at least 200. In games that spans over 3 or 4 days, lead needs to be 150. 2-day matches, lead needs to be 100, and a 1-day match, 75. We first cover point 2. When the captain decides to exercise the option of asking the other side to follow on. The captain, if that is his or her decision, they need to inform the umpires that they would like to exercise this option. The umpires will then in turn go and inform the other side that they need to go bat again, or if they don't, if the captain does not decide to exercise the option, they will then the umpires will then tell the side they're not exercising the option for you to follow on. They're going to go bat again. So captain needs to notify what his or her decision is, and as soon as that decision has been made, cannot then be changed afterwards. When we have the first day of play lost, no play on the first day of the game. So if no play at all, the bowlers and umpire did not call play, and that indicates the start of the day. If no play takes place on the first day of a match, and when I use the example, I'm going to use Test match cricket as the example. If that is the case, when it comes to the follow-on then changes slightly. I'll use an example just to illustrate how the follow-on changes when there's no play that happened on the first day of our match. And let's say we're using test matches as an example. So in our test match, India playing Sri Lanka. Test match spans over 5 days. On day 1, not a single ball was bowled. Umpire did not call play on day 1. So it rained the whole of day 1. Day number 2, 10 o'clock, bright sunshine. Game starts at 10 o'clock on day 2. So no play on day 1. Play was not called on day 1. Play will start 10 o'clock on day 2. So now the law tells us when the first day of play was lost. So when it comes now to the follow-on target or what the lead needs to be, you now need to look at this as being a 4-day game and not a 5-day test match anymore. So now when it comes to what the lead needs to be and what should the lead be in a 4-day game, if I go back to our previous slide, 150 runs. So in point 1, if it's a 5-day game, the lead needs to be at least 200 runs. And if that is the case, the captain has the option to ask the other side to follow on. But in our example that I've used, there was no play on day 1. Play only starts on day 2. So as soon as there was no play on day 1, this is now going to be a 4-day test match. Now when it comes to the follow-on and what the lead needs to be, because it's a 4-day game, the lead now needs to be 150 runs. But I want to emphasize that it needs to be the first day's play that is lost. In an example where, let's say India playing Sri Lanka again, on day 1, play starts on time. 10 o'clock, we have a full day, we've got 90 overs. Day 2, it rains the whole day. Not a single ball was bowled on day 2. And play will then start on day 3 again at 10 o'clock. So now to activate this clause number 3, it needs to be the first day of play that needs to have been lost. So in my latest example, we started the test match on time. Day 1, we bowled 90 overs. Day 2 was rained out, and we only restarted on day 3 again. So yes, this is going to be a 4-day test match, but we cannot activate this clause number 3 because it's not the first day's play that's lost. And because it's not the first day's play that's lost, it's the second day. In terms of now the follow and what the lead needs to be, the lead will stay at 200 runs in our test match. It can only activate this clause if the first day's play is lost. The last law that I'm covering this evening, before I pass the baton over to Tom, it covers declaration and forfeiture. So the law allows the captain of the batting side to declare his or her innings closed whenever the ball is dead during that particular innings. Captain of the batting side to declare at any time, as soon as the ball is dead, if he or she feels they want to declare the innings, the law allows for that. The law also allows for a captain to forfeit either of his or her side's innings before the commencement of that particular innings. We saw in an earlier slide, a forfeited innings shall be considered to be a completed innings. Forfeiture of an innings is not that popular. It doesn't happen that often in cricket, but it is an option. The law allows for an innings to be forfeited. The last, when we get to the next slide, we'll see an example of when a innings was forfeited by a captain, but we'll get to that in the next slide. But it's not, doesn't happen that often, but it is in the law, and a captain can forfeit his or her side's innings as long as it's done before the commencement of that innings. And as soon as the captain decided to either declare his or her side's innings or to forfeit an innings, the law wants the opposing captain to be informed. And once you've decided, or the captain's decided, to forfeit the innings or to declare the innings, once notified, once you've decided, you inform the umpires inform the opposing captain, and once that decision has been made, you cannot change it afterwards. Once in instance that I can remember, when there was a forfeiture of an innings, it happened in the year 2000. It was a test match between South Africa and England, and there was lots of rain around. And the two captains at the time, the late Hansie Cronje and Nassau Hussein, because of so much rain around, England declared the innings. South Africa decided to forfeit their second innings. They tried to make a game of it. And yes, the result was reached, but afterwards we found out that Cronje and there was discussions between Cronje and a bookmaker, and there was match fixing, and this match was scrapped from the archives of cricket. So this is just an example of when a forfeiture took place, but because of the match fixing, this particular test match was scrapped from the record books. Tom, thank you so much. That's all I'm covering for this evening. Handing over to you.
Thank you, Dula. Good evening to you, and good evening to all the candidates. I will be taking everyone through laws 16, 17, and 18 this evening. Bear with me while I share my screen. All right, so law 16 is the result, and Abdullah has already taken us through how a match starts and when a match is concluded. So how do we know who has won the match, or was it a draw, or was it a tie? Let's have a look at what the law says about the result of a cricket match. Abdullah has mentioned that a match can either be a 2 innings per side match or a 1 innings per side match. So a win in a 2 innings per side match occurs when the side which has scored a total of runs in excess of that scored in the 2 completed innings of the opposing side shall win the match. And what is key in this sentence is the 2 completed innings of the opposing side. Okay, later I will play you a video of a match, and you need to tell me if that match was a tie or a draw. and it's all to do with whether the last innings of the match was concluded or not. What about a win in a 1 innings per side match? That is an example of a 1 innings per side match is a one-day international or a T20 international. Law tells us that the side which has scored in its 1 innings a total of runs in excess of that scored by the opposing side in its 1 completed innings shall win the match. Can umpires award a match? Let's see what the law says. Law tells us that regardless of any agreement under Law 13.1.2, a match shall be lost by a side which either concedes defeat or, in the opinion of the umpires, refuses to play. If so, the umpires shall award the match to the side which is wanting to carry on playing the match. If an umpire considers that an action by any player or players might constitute a refusal by either side to play, then the umpires together shall ascertain the cause of the action. You cannot just award a match before you have heard both sides of the story as to why Team X does not want to play. If the umpires then decide together that this action does constitute a refusal to play by one side, they shall so inform the captain of that side. If the captain persists in the action, the umpires shall award the match. Let's have a look at a video explaining a match which was awarded initially, and it caused quite a controversy because of the reason that it was awarded. There was a huge fallout after the whole incident, and it highlights the importance of umpires needing to be sure of why indeed they are penalizing a side before they do so. Abdullah, please let me know if there is no sound on the video.
More than 2,300 test matches have been played. Over 1,500 of these have ended in a result. Over 700 have been drawn, 2 have been tied, and only 1 has ended in a forfeit.
The thing I remember about the forfeit test is none of us had a clue what was going on, really.
According to law 16.3.2, a match shall be lost by a side which, in the opinion of the umpires, refuses to play. On August 20, 2006, this rule was invoked for the first time on an afternoon that swung wildly between high drama and farce. An hour before tea on the 4th day, at the end of the 56th over of England's second innings, umpires Darrell Hare and Billy Doctrove asked for a change of ball.
One of them serve umpires came out with a new box of balls, so it's clear they were changing the ball. No big deal there. But instead of asking the bowling side to choose the new one, he asked the batting side. You think, oh, hello, interesting.
The umpires then awarded England 5 penalty runs, confirming that they had pulled Pakistan up for tampering with the ball. The trouble was there was no evidence, no jelly, no dirt, no sandpaper.
A lot of people have looked at that ball have different opinions. Some feel it was clearly tampered with, and some think it was more than just playable. It was a good-looking ball. Others think you can see some evidence of scratching, but none that suggests it's been done on purpose and by hand, or even by a foreign object. So very mixed views.
It was after the tea break, taken more than 15 overs, after the 5-run penalty, that things really escalated. The umpires walked out, the English batsmen walked out, the Pakistanis didn't.
They felt hugely wronged.
You know, they weren't sure that whether they wanted to come out. After waiting for 20 minutes, the umpires walked to the Pakistan dressing room, came back a few minutes later, and took the bails off.
And the match is aborted or abandoned, cancelled, or no, wrong, none of that. We hear the match has been awarded to England. Wow.
That wasn't the end of it either. After a protest lasting almost an hour, and following discussions with match referee Mike Proctor, Inzamam al-Haq finally leads the Pakistan team out again. This time, though, the umpires stayed put. They've made their decision, and they're sticking by it.
My view of that was that it was very inflexible. Mike Proctor was the match referee in a very difficult position. I think there should have been an instruction from on high, from the chief executive or chairman of ICC, that this is a unique situation because of the unproven circumstances. In a proven circumstance of a tampered ball and the side refusing to come out, fair enough, but this was unproven.
Several hours after the bails were taken off, the ICC and the English and Pakistan cricket boards confirm in a joint statement that the match had indeed been forfeited. The hints kept on coming. With no evidence to back up the accusation, the ICC dropped the ball tampering charges. But Inzamam was banned for 4 one-dayers for refusing to lead his team out. They also removed Hare from international duty, who in turn threatened to sue the ICC and the PCB for racial discrimination. 2 years later, the ICC overturned the result from a Pakistan loss to a draw, but the MCC refused to recognize this.
It was all incredibly nasty and another stain on the game. And there's never been any concrete proof that Pakistan were in the wrong anyway.
To date, this remains the only scorecard in history to state England awarded the match, opposition refused to play. In the end, though, there was only one real loser: cricket itself.
So I think the message to take away from that particular video is that us as umpires need to know exactly, apologies for that. We need to know exactly the reason as to why a team does not wish to continue the game. And we need to encourage them by all means to continue to play. And if they do want to lodge a protest, they should play under protest. But by all means, continue to play the game, and then we will deal with the protest after the game. Nobody wants to see a match awarded to a side because there is refusal to play by the other side. So let's have a look at the other results in a cricket match: a tie or a draw. A tie is when all innings have been completed and the scores are equal. Abdullah told us what constituted a completed innings, and so we need to keep that in mind when we are deciding whether or not a match has been drawn or it has been tied. Law tells us for the definition of a draw, it is when it is not determined in any of the ways stated previously. Okay, so next I'm going to show you a video of a test match between England and Zimbabwe back in the early 2000s. And this is the last day, in fact, the last over of the match. And I want all of you at the end of the video to type into the chat box whether you think the result of this match is a draw or if the result of this test match is a tie. Apologies for the poor visual quality. As mentioned, this was from way back early in the 2000s.
Heath Streak will be the bowler. England will be smiling at the end of this over. They need 13 runs to win this match. Zimbabwe in no hurry. Campbell's going to make sure that every corner of this boundary is patrolled. Streak tonight.
On boundary, anything could happen.
Down the leg side. Perfectly legitimate today. One ball gone with no runs scored.
One-day cricket would be an eagle, and Test cricket, it's quite legitimate. They bowled very well, Heath Streak, and particularly Guy Whittle. I think it came on. The game was probably still in England's favour. Used to attract it back. Bowled very well.
Knight's got it out to long off. Darren Gough prepared to sacrifice his wicket, but he's got back for two. Flower, the fielder, making sure there'd be no overthrow, allowed England back for two. I think Zimbabwe will settle for that. That's what Knight's looking for. He's chipped it over. It's hit for six. Unbelievable. Nick Knight's got his streak away over mid-wicket for 6 runs. Now England are back in it. England now need 5 runs to win off 3 balls. The England supporters are going crazy.
5 or 3 balls. Does he leave everyone on the boundary, or does he bring someone in?
Nick Knight, the hero of the hour now. That 6 runs has made all the difference. Have a look at this.
He keeps firing it in the same area. The batsman will eventually be able to adjust, and that's what's happened here. Nick Knight, 92 not out now. 1, 6, 5 fours. That has changed everything. 5 runs now needed and 3 balls.
A lot of critics of one-day cricket, but that shot would never have been played in a test match 15 years ago. Here's Streak tonight. England require 5. It's wide outside the off stump. No signal from umpire Ian Robinson. England now requiring 5 off 2. How does Heath Streak feel? Full toss. Knight can only get it away for 1. Gough will definitely come back for the second run. He's made it with a dive. Streak can't take the ball cleanly. England scramble 2. 3 to win off the last ball. We've seen one-day finishes all over the world. We've never seen a test match finish like this. Now, the batsmen are in conference. The big 3 for Zimbabwe in conference. Campbell has told the bowler what to do. He goes out onto the boundary edge. Andy Flower wishes Heath Streak good luck. Nick Knight takes a few deep breaths. England need 3 runs to win off the very last ball to win this test match. Can Nick Knight conjure up another boundary? One feel it has to be a boundary now for England to win this match. Here comes Streak. Knight's down the trap. He's got it out to deep cover. There's a man there. This too will bring the scores level. Andy Flower's got it. Darren Gough vainly goes for the 3rd runs. The scores are level, but the match is drawn. England finished tantalisingly 1 run short. They couldn't get the final run. Nick Knight finishes on 96 not out. What a test match day we've seen here in Bulawayo. England finish just 1 run short. Controversial tactics from Zimbabwe as they fire the ball wide either side of the wicket. I'm sure England would have done the same thing in their situation. This is test match cricket, remember. Zimbabwe have fought all the way and out of the fire have salvaged a draw.
That was an absolutely amazing game of cricket. One of the...
I just want to pause it right at the end where we've got the scores.
Zimbabwe fought all the way and out to the far.
So you add up all the scores, you will notice that the totals of both teams are equal. So my question to you is this match a draw or is this match a tie? The scores are equal if you add up Zimbabwe's 2 innings and if you add up England's 2 innings. The critical question to ask yourself is whether the 4th innings was completed or not. That will determine whether this was a draw or a tie. Please put your answer in the chat box and we will discuss it at the beginning of our question and answer session this evening. Law goes on to tell us that if a boundary is scored before the batters have completed sufficient runs to win the match, the whole of the boundary allowance shall be credited to the side's total, and in the case of a hit by the bat, to the striker's score. So I'll give you an example to illustrate what the law is trying to teach us here. If Virat Kohli is on 98 and India need 1 run to win a test match, he would obviously like to score a century. So he hits a full toss through the covers and sets off for a run. If he completes the run by grounding his bat and making good his ground at the opposite end, as well as his partner doing the same, then that will be 1 run and that would win the game for India. And Virat Kohli would not get his century. Of course, batters know this law. So what Virat Kohli would do in that situation is he would hit his cover drive, and seeing that it would make it to the boundary, he would not complete the single. He would allow the ball to go over the boundary rope for 4. He would end up winning the match for his country, but also scoring 102 runs to complete his century. So the key there is that if only 1 run is needed to win the game and the single is completed before the ball crosses the boundary, then the single will be added to both the team score and the batter's score. But if the batters do not complete that single, then the boundary will be added to the team score as well as the striker's score. How do we state a result? If the side batting last wins the match without losing all of its wickets, the result shall be stated as a win by the number of wickets still then to fall. So in the video that we watched, I think England needed 206 runs to win. They finished on 205 for 6 wickets down. If they had reached 206 runs with 6 wickets down, they would have won the match by 4 wickets. How do I get to 4 wickets? A side is all out when 10 wickets have fallen. So if only 6 have fallen, then 10 minus 6 means they had 4 wickets in hand, and that is the number of wickets that they win the match by. England win the match by 4 wickets if they had achieved the target of 206 runs to win with 6 wickets down. England win the match by 4 wickets. I'm not sure if I said 6 wickets or 4 wickets. So if England had reached the target of 206 to win with 6 wickets down. Then they had 4 wickets in hand, and the result would be England win the match by 4 wickets. If the fielding side wins the match, the result shall be stated as a win by runs. So if Zimbabwe had bowled England out by 200 for 200 runs in that final innings, remember the target for England to win was 206. So in essence, Zimbabwe was 205 runs ahead. So if England were all out for 200 runs, then Zimbabwe would have won by 5 runs. I'm sure you've all seen and know how to calculate the statement of a result of a cricket match. If the match is decided by one side conceding defeat or refusing to play, the result shall be stated as match conceded or match awarded, whichever the case might be. What happens if there are mistakes in scoring? Law tells us that if, after the players and umpires have left the field in the belief that the match has been concluded, but then the umpires subsequently discovered that a mistake in scoring has occurred which affects the result, then they shall adopt the following procedure. If, when the players leave the field, the side batting last has not completed its innings, and either the number of overs to be bowled in the last hour or in that innings has not been completed, or the agreed time for close of play or for the end of the innings has not been reached, then unless one side concedes defeat, the umpires shall order play to resume. So we will go back onto the field and the match shall be correctly concluded. Law goes on to tell us that unless a result is reached sooner, play will then continue until the prescribed number of overs has been completed and either time for close of play has been reached or the allotted time for the innings has expired. No account shall be taken of the time between going off the field and the resumption of play. Okay, so basically we need to ensure that the correct result is achieved. If we come off the field and the scorers tell us they made a mistake, we double check with them what the mistake was and what we need to go back onto the field for to achieve. Once the umpires have agreed with the scorers the correctness of the scores at the conclusion of the match, the result cannot thereafter be changed. Okay, in Western Province Cricket Association club cricket matches, there are what are called match cards, and once the two captains of the two sides have signed those match cards with the result at the bottom of the match, each match card, then that result can no longer be changed. That is law 16, the result. Now we move on to law 17, the over. How many balls constitute an over? I'm sure you all know. Law tells us that the ball shall be bowled from each end alternately in overs of 6 legal deliveries. When does an over start? An over has started when the bowler starts his or her run-up, or if he or she has no run-up, his or her bowling action, landing, the back foot landing, constitutes the start of the over in the first delivery. When will a ball not count as a legal delivery in the over? If it is called dead or is to be considered dead before the striker has had an opportunity to play it, that will not count as a legal delivery in the over. If the ball is called dead because the striker was not ready to receive the delivery, or if the striker was distracted while receiving the delivery and pulls away from the ball, that ball shall not be a legal delivery in the over. If a ball is a no ball or a wide, we all know that it needs to be rebowled, so it is not a legal delivery in the over. When a player returns onto the field without the permission of an umpire and comes into contact with the ball automatically becomes dead, and that ball will need to be rebowled. If there's an instance of illegal fielding, and we will deal with that next week, then that ball shall not be a legal delivery in the over. If there's a deliberate attempt to distract the striker, or deliberate distraction, deception, or obstruction of either batter, then the umpire needs to call and signal dead ball. Either umpire needs to call and signal dead ball, and that ball will not count as a legal delivery in the over and needs to be rebowled. And of course, a ball shall not count as one of the 6 legal deliveries of the over unless it is delivered. Any deliveries other than those listed on the previous slide shall be known as valid deliveries, and only valid deliveries shall count towards the 6 balls of the over. When 6 valid balls have been bowled and when the ball becomes dead, the umpire shall call over before leaving the wicket at the bowler's end. Quite importantly, and we'll deal with this tomorrow in the dead ball law, it's very important that an umpire should not call over before he or she considers the ball to be dead. And we'll have a nice video for you guys to watch where 1 or 2 players think the ball is dead and that's the end of the over, but the opposition didn't think so. What happens if umpires miscount? Law tells us that if the umpire miscounts the number of valid balls, the over as counted by the umpire shall stand. So if we play 5 balls, 5 legal deliveries in the over, and we call over and we don't realize that we only allowed 5 legal deliveries to be bowled, then that will be the end of that over. And we cannot correct it if the new over has started by the run-up of the next bowler. Similarly, if we allow 7 deliveries to be bowled and runs are scored off the 7th delivery, or there's a wicket that falls in the 7th delivery of the over, those runs or that wicket will stand. We will not get a call from the scorers to tell us that that was the 7th ball and we need to cancel all runs or cancel the wicket that happened in that 7th delivery. However many balls we allow to be bowled in an over before calling over is what will be recorded in the scorebook. Okay, so it's very important for us as umpires. We're a team on the field. We need to make sure that we count overs correctly up to 6 valid deliveries. We normally lose count when something strange happens in the over. So if there is a wide delivery, if there is a no ball, if there is a dead ball, or if there is a wicket that falls in an over, that is usually when we will miscount. That is why it's a good idea for the 2 on-field umpires to confirm how many balls are left if any of those 4 things happen in an over. If there's a wide, if there's a no ball, if there is a dead ball, or if there's a wicket that falls, or if there is any injury or any other stoppage in play, to reconfirm how many balls remain in the over after that stoppage has occurred. So we don't always have radios or walkie-talkies with us to communicate with our on-field partner. And we can't be walking towards each other every time we need to confirm how many balls are left in the over. So there are universal signals for number of balls remaining in the over. And if it is a normal over and nothing out of the ordinary happens, we normally just signal 3, 2, and 1 balls left in the over. How do we signal 3 balls left in the over? 3 balls left in the over is halfway in the over. So that is the universal signal for 3 balls left. It's on your waist. Just some umpires put their hand right there and leave it still. Others like to move from side to side on the waist. 2 balls left in the over is simply 2, a nice peace sign, and make sure that it's clear and visible. You don't need to be discreet when showing your number of ball signals left to your partner. So I like to have my 2 outside of me, because the 1 I like to have in front of my body. Usually I'm wearing a white shirt, and so the color of my finger is very clear against the white shirt that I'm wearing. If I'm wearing a black shirt or any other colored dark shirt, then I might put my 1 out to the side, like so. Just be sure that you don't signal 1 up here, because we've already gone through signals last week, and that is very similar to a level 4, the second signal for an offense that has been made by a player. If the first ball of the over is a no ball, that means there's still 6 balls remaining in the over. How do we show 6 balls remaining in an over? The fist is the internationally recognized signal for 6 balls left in the over. Once again, good idea to have it out to your side so that your partner from 40 meters away can clearly see your fist. 5 is usually out here, and then 4, you want to make it very different or very far away from your 5. So I normally have my 4 either in front of me or down by the side of me. Okay. 3, 2, and 1 I've already explained. So it might feel a bit remedial to have to count with your partner, but on a long, hot day when there's a lot of action in terms of no balls, wides, dead balls, and wickets, trust me, it is very easy to miscount. If you and your partner do not agree on how many balls are left, you can simply try and get the attention of the scorers and ask them how many balls they have got left, and you go with what the scorers say they have got number of balls left. Usually scorers do not shout from the side to tell you if you have called a 5-ball over or a 7-ball over. It is up to you, if you are unsure with your partner how many balls are left, to confirm with the scorers. Rather embarrass yourself for 5 seconds getting confirmation from the scorers as to how many balls are left than allowing a 7th delivery to be bowled and a wicket falling in that 7th delivery. That is by far more embarrassing than shouting and asking how many balls are left. If, having miscounted, the umpire allows an over to continue after 6 valid balls have been bowled, he or she may subsequently call over as the ball becomes dead after any delivery, even if that delivery is not a valid ball. Let me give you an example to illustrate what the law is trying to teach us here. If 6 legal deliveries have been bowled and the 7th delivery is a no ball, usually we would bowl another ball after a no ball. But law tells us here that if we then realize after the no ball that that was indeed the 7th delivery of the over, even though it was a no ball, we can, and law tells us we need to call over because 6 legal deliveries have been bowled. Yes, it will seem very strange, but you cannot rectify an error by making another error. So just call over after the no ball if you are certain that that was indeed the 7th delivery of the over. Can a bowler bowl from both ends? Let's see what the law says. Law tells us that a bowler shall be allowed to change ends as often as he or she desires, provided that he or she does not bowl 2 overs consecutively, nor bowl parts of each of 2 consecutive overs in the same innings. So what does this mean? This means that in a test match for South Africa, if Kagiso Rabada opens the bowling at Newlands against Pakistan from the Weinberg end, he bowls his 6 balls and the over is completed. He cannot bowl the next over that will be bowled from the other end. A different bowler will have to bowl from the Kelvin Grove end, which is the north end at Newlands. The Weinberg end is the south end at Newlands. So in the same innings, a bowler can bowl from both ends as long as it is not in consecutive overs. So, for example, Kagiso Rabada could bowl the first 5 overs from the Weinberg end, over number 1, number 3, number 5, number 7, and number 9 of the match. And then he will take a break. And then after 20 overs have been bowled in total, or 21 overs have been bowled in total, he can bowl number 22 from the Kelvin Grove end. He can bowl as early as over number 14 at the Kelvin Grove end. Because he bowled 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, he cannot bowl number 11. He cannot bowl number 10 from the Kelvin Grove end, but he can bowl number 12 from the Kelvin Grove end. I hope that makes sense. If you are playing a test match and you bowl the last over of an innings from the Wynberg end, can Kagiso Rabada open the next bowling innings for South Africa from the Wynberg end? The answer is yes, because those 2 overs would not be in the same innings. Okay, so the only restriction here is that you cannot bowl 2 consecutive overs in the same innings. When is an over completed? Law tells us that other than at the end of an innings, a bowler shall finish an over in progress unless he or she is incapacitated or suspended under any of the laws. If for any reason other than the end of an innings, an over is left uncompleted at the start of an interval or interruption, it shall be completed on resumption of play. Abdullah mentioned earlier that if a wicket falls within 3 minutes of a lunch break or within 3 minutes of a tea break, that that interval will be taken immediately. So if, for example, that wicket falls at 11:58 and it was the 3rd ball of the over, it is 2 minutes before lunch. So yes, we won't complete that over yet. We will take lunch at 11:58 and we'll come back at 12:38 and we will complete the last 3 balls of that over before starting a new over from the opposite end. So what happens if a bowler is incapacitated or suspended during an over? Law tells us that the umpire at the bowler's end shall call and signal dead ball. Another bowler shall complete the over from the same end, provided that the replacement bowler does not bowl 2 overs consecutively, nor bowl any part of each of 2 consecutive overs. So that bowler who is completing the over should not have bowled any part of the previous over and will not be allowed to bowl any part of the next over. Last law that we will be covering for today before going on to our question and answer session is Law 18, scoring runs. How do we score runs in cricket? Law tells us that the score shall be reckoned by runs, and a run is scored so often as the batters at any time while the ball is in play have crossed and made good their ground from end to end. Okay, that's running in between the wickets by the batters. When a boundary is scored, the batting side also scores runs. Lastly, when the umpires award penalty runs to either side, that is a means of runs being scored. Sometimes a batter or batters run short. What is the definition of a short run? Law tells us that a run is short if a batter fails to make good his or her ground in turning for a further run. Okay, so you cannot have a short run if you only run 1 run and complete it, because a short run is only ran when turning short for a further run. Although a short run shortens the succeeding one, the latter, if completed, shall not be regarded as short. And then some batters, David Miller is a good example, bat outside of their crease. Law says that a striker setting off for the first run from in front of his or her popping crease may do so without penalty. They do not need to run back into their crease before running to the other end to complete the single. If they bat outside of their crease, they can simply run from their position outside of the crease to the other end to make good their ground to complete a run. Let's have a look at a video that explains the difference between unintentional short runs and deliberate short runs and how the two are dealt with by the umpires as well as the scorers.
Hello guys, welcome to my channel. This video is a new addition to the analysis series. Let's get started. On 15th of November 2018, second day of second test match between Sri Lanka and England, a strange incident happened. Let's watch the footage. Looks like a normal short run case, isn't it? Well, that's not the case. Let's see what umpire's decision was. You did not understand what he signaled. He initially disallowed all the runs scored by the batsman on that delivery. Further, he informed the batsman about deliberate short running and awarded 5 penalty runs to the fielding side. Now, let's see what the cricket law has to say about running short. There are two categories in this, unintentional and deliberate. Let's take a look at unintentional short running first. If a batsman runs short, then the umpire shall call and signal short run as soon as the ball becomes dead, and that run shall not be scored. For example, if they run 2 and if they run 1 short, then only 1 run will be scored. Now, let's take a look at deliberate short run. Cricket law states that if either umpire considers that one or both the batsmen deliberately ran short, then wait for the ball to become dead and further disallow all the runs scored on that delivery, return the batsmen to their original end, and award 5 penalty runs to the fielding side. Now, let's see why the umpire considered this incident as deliberate short running. As you can see, both the batsmen start running and then striker Roshan Silva feels that the ball will reach the boundary. But upon seeing Moeen Ali has stopped the ball, he runs back to the striker's end. But in between, the striker Roshan Silva did not ground the bat at all, which made the umpire to consider this as deliberate short run. If he had at least tried to ground the bat, then most likely that the umpire would not have considered this as a deliberate short run. 5 run penalty for this feels a bit harsh, isn't it? Now let's see why exactly this law exists. In an IPL match between Mumbai Indians and Kings 11, while chasing 231, Mumbai Indians needed 16 runs of the last over. Kieron Pollard, who faces the first ball of the over, strikes the ball and sets off for the run, thinking that he can come back for 2. But upon realizing that he cannot make it, he runs back to the striker's end without completing the first run. And it can be seen that he did that deliberately as he wanted to get back the strike. It is clearly unfair as he got 1 run and also he came back to the strike. To prevent the players from doing such things, this law exists. But in Roshan Silva's case, he was not trying to gain any unfair advantage. But since he did not make any effort to complete the first run, it was ruled deliberate short run. Still have any doubts with this? Do let me know in the comment section. If you like the video, then hit the like button and share with all your friends. If you have not subscribed yet, then don't forget to subscribe for more such contents.
It's very important that we know the difference between a deliberate short run and an unintentional short run, because they are treated very differently in the law. How do we determine whether a batter has deliberately ran short or if it was unintentional? The example of Kieran Pollard in the IPL match is a very good example of a batter running short deliberately. Why? It's usually in the latter overs of a limited overs innings, where a very good batter is batting with a lesser batter. So Kieran Pollard normally bats number 5 or number 6, and he was probably batting with a number 10 or number 11 batter and wanted to keep the strike so that he could try and get those 15 runs needed in the last over for Mumbai Indian to win the match. So it will hardly ever be the first over of a test match where you see deliberate short running by a batter. The umpires in that match of the Mumbai Indians actually did not implement the deliberate short run penalties. Either they did not know the law or they were too afraid to implement the laws, because as you noticed, they are quite severe. 5 runs awarded to the fielding side and all runs disallowed to the batting side, and return both batters to their original ends. So it's quite important for us as umpires to know our laws, to be able to detect when there is a deliberate short running by either batter, and we then will implement the laws accordingly. We should never be afraid to lay down the law when players are cheating. Deliberate short running is cheating, and that is why the law has such strict and harsh punishment for such actions. If we know our laws and we are confident in our knowledge and application of the laws, we will be able to apply them accordingly. Let's have a quick look at penalty runs as another means of a team being awarded. Law tells us that runs shall be awarded when there are deliberate short runs, as we've just spoken about. When a player returns to the field without permission and comes into contact with the ball, then 5 penalty runs will be awarded to the batting side. When there is illegal fielding by the fielding side, 5 penalty runs will be awarded to the batting side. No balls and wides are also considered penalty runs. Most of us refer to them as extras, but technically the law refers to them as penalty runs. When the ball goes through the wicketkeeper's legs and hits the helmet that is placed behind the wicketkeeper on the ground, that is also 5 penalty runs awarded to the batting side. And law 41 and 42 covers various scenarios of unfair play and unruly behavior by players, which is also punishable by 5 penalty runs being awarded to the opposite side opposing side. Boundaries, I'm sure we all know what our boundaries are. We have boundary 4 and boundary 6. And law 19, which we will start with tomorrow, covers boundaries in details. So we will not go into details today on boundaries. Are any runs scored when a batter is dismissed? Yes and no. Let's see what the law says. Law tells us that when a batter is dismissed, any runs for penalties awarded to either side shall stand. So that's a no ball or wide or penalty, 5 penalty runs if applicable. No other runs shall be credited to the batting side when a batter is dismissed except as follows. If a batter is dismissed obstructing the field, the batting side shall score any runs completed before the offense unless the obstruction prevented a catch from being made. If a batter is dismissed run out, the batting side shall score any runs completed before the wicket was put down. So if a batter was run out on the second run, then the first run which was completed will count. Only the second run will not count because they were run out before the second run was completed. If, however, a striker who has a runner is dismissed run out, any runs completed by the runner and the other batter shall be disallowed. Some of you will be surprised to see that law still talks about runners. It is indeed still possible or still allowed in the laws of cricket for runners to be used. The over 40s World Cup that took place in South Africa in March 2024, myself and Abdullah officiated in that World Cup. There were runners allowed. Law 25, which we will get to next week, Monday, allows for runners. The playing conditions of international men's and women's cricket, not veterans cricket, does not allow for runners, but the laws of cricket still allow for runners. So we need to be aware of the rules around runners. In Western Province Cricket Association club cricket, our third division is mainly played by elderly statesmen who are prone to injury, as we all are the older we get. So there as well, runners are allowed. But in our main men's and women's open leagues, the first division, the Premier Division, we do not allow runners. The playing conditions disallow runners. However, law still makes provision for runners, which we will learn about next week. Who gets credits and when do they get credited for runs? If the ball is struck by the bat, all runs scored by the batting side shall be credited to the striker, except for if there is an award of 5 penalty runs, which shall be scored as penalty runs. The 1-run penalty for a no ball shall be scored as no ball extras. And if the ball is not struck by the bat, runs shall be scored as penalty runs, byes, leg byes, no ball extras, or wides, whichever the case might be. If byes or leg byes accrue from a no ball, only the 1-run penalty for no ball shall be scored as no ball extras, and the remainder will be scored as byes or leg byes, whichever the case might be. The poor old bowler, when will he or she be debited against their figures? All runs scored by the striker will be debited against the bowler's figures. All runs scored as noble extras will be debited against the bowler's figures. All runs scored as wides will be debited against the bowler's figures. When do batters return to their original end? I've already stated one condition: when there is deliberate short running. Let's see the rest. Law tells us that when the striker is dismissed in any of the modes of dismissals listed below, the not out batter shall return to his or her original end. If the striker is out bowled, then the not out batter remains at the non-striker's end. If the striker is out stumped, then the not out batter remains at the non-striker's end. If the striker is out hit the ball twice, then the non-striker remains at the non-striker's end. Same is the case with leg before wicket, hit wicket, and most recently caught. So before this law was changed in 2022, you will remember that if a striker would hit the ball up in the air and the batters would cross before the catch would be taken, they would not score any runs. However, the not out batter would now be on strike for the next ball. However, this law changed in October 2022. It says that even if the batters cross while the ball is in the air before the ball is caught, the not out batter needs to return to his or her end for the next delivery, so the new batter will be on strike. If the striker is out obstructing the field where the obstruction or distraction prevents the striker from being out caught, then the non-striker will return to the non-striker's end. That is all we have for you this evening in terms of content to present. I will now unshare and go to our chat box to see if there have been any questions listed while we were presenting. I'm going back to the top, and I asked, between the Zimbabwe and England match in Bulawayo back in 2002, I think it was, where the scores were level, what was the result of that test match? Was it a draw or was it a tie? I see a couple of candidates say tie. And then Abhishek says, as innings not completed, so it is a draw. A lot of you are saying it is a tie. But Lalit also says that match is a draw because England's innings are not completed. That is the key to that particular scenario, ladies and gentlemen. The last innings by England, they were 6 wickets down. Does that constitute a completed innings? No. Abdullah told us that an innings is completed when a side is all out, okay? If England were 205 all out, then the scores would be level. All 4 innings of the test match would have been complete, and then it would have been a tie. But because England's second innings was not complete, there were 6 wickets down. It means that the innings was not complete. The test match was a draw, not a tie. I hope that understanding is clear. For a tie to take place, all innings need to be completed in the match. In that particular match that I showed you, in England's second innings of 205 for 6 was not completed. That is why the result of that test match was a draw and not a tie. Okay, I think AJ Kanetka has tried to explain that. He says a match is called as a tie if at the end of all the innings of a match, the scores of 2 teams are exactly the same. Okay, the key there is that the second innings of England was not completed. Right, the first question that I've come across in the chat box is from Sridhar. If a bowler bowls the last over before lunch, will he be allowed to start the first over after lunch? Abdullah, I need a quick water break. Can you please explain to Sridhar if Kagiso Rabada bowls the last over before lunch for South Africa, will he be allowed to bowl the first over after lunch? Over to you, Dilla.
Copy, Tom. Let's first look at what the law tells us. The law say any bowler is not allowed to bowl 2 consecutive overs in the same innings. Not allowed to bowl 2 consecutive overs in the same innings. So let's use the test match as an example. So Kagiso Rabada bowled, the captain tosses the ball to him at 11:57. He then bowls the over. He completes the over at 12:01. Umpire look at his watch. He sees it's 12:01. And let's say it is the 30th over of the innings. So Kagiso Rabada bowled the 30th over, completed it at 12:01. So 12:01, seeing that it's now lunchtime being 12 o'clock, so lunch will then be from 12:01, and the first ball after lunch needs to be bowled at 12:41. So all the players will now go off the field and go and enjoy some lunch. So now Kagiso bowled the 30th over, the last over before lunch. So let's just go to the law. You're not allowed, any bowler is not allowed to bowl 2 consecutive overs in the same innings. So play stopped at over number 30. So after lunch, over number 31 needs to be bowled. So that's going to be over 31 is going to be the first over after lunch. So can Kagiso Rabada bowl over 31? What does the law say? You're not allowed to bowl 2 consecutive overs. So if over 31 is the first over after lunch, then if we apply the law, Kagiso is not allowed to bowl over 31. And the reason is, if you allow him to bowl over 31, he then would have bowled 2 consecutive overs, and that is not allowed as per the laws. So someone else needs to bowl the first over after lunch, and Kagiso can then bowl again over number 32. So just to emphasize again, you're not allowed to bowl in the same innings 2 consecutive overs. If this was a different innings, let's say before lunch, Kagiso Rabada bowled the 30th over, and let's say Bangladesh was 300 for 9, and ball number 3 of the over, Kagiso then takes the 10th Bangladeshi wicket. So at 12 100 hours, third ball of the over, Kagiso takes the 10th Bangladeshi wicket. So seeing that Bangladesh is now dismissed, we saw last week that as soon as the side is dismissed, it's now lunchtime. So lunchtime will be from 12 till 12:40. Now let's say we've just also covered the follow-on law. Let's say South Africa, I'm just using an example just to show that if it's two separate innings, Kagiso can then bowl. So if a side had to follow on, Kagiso took the 10th wicket of the Bangladesh innings. South Africa now being, let's say, 250 runs ahead. They asked Bangladesh to follow on. Can Kagiso bowl the first over of Bangladesh's second innings? Yes, Kagiso is then allowed to bowl the first over of Bangladesh's second innings. And the reason is he bowled the last over of Bangladesh's first innings. And seeing that they were asked to follow on, and this is now the second innings, i.e. a different innings, Kagiso is now allowed to bowl the first over of Bangladesh's second innings if they were asked to follow on. But if it's in the same innings, a bowler is not allowed to bowl 2 consecutive overs. Over, Tom.
Thanks, Tulab. I see Lalit, I think maybe we've reached your bedtime there in India. He wants to know when the lecture will finish. So Lalit, South African time, the lectures run from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. And of course, you can leave whatever time you wish because the lectures are recorded and are posted on our YouTube page, latest the next morning after each lecture. Indian Standard Time is 3.5 hours ahead of South African time. So the lectures start at 9:30 p.m. Indian time and should finish at 11:30 Indian time. But if we have a lot of questions, we could go on all night. Celso asks, if during the exam I do not achieve the required pass mark, do I only do the parts of the exam that I failed? No, Celso. The way that the exam works is that you have got 90 minutes to answer the 69 questions. They are true or false and multiple choice questions. And if you are done before the 90 minutes, which is usually the case, then you submit and then you will get your result immediately. If you get the pass mark of 80% or more, then the certificate will be sent to me and I will forward it to you as soon as I can. If you achieve less than 80%, then you have 4 more attempts. In total, you have up to 5 attempts to gain the pass mark of 80%. And when you restart the exam, it is the same 69 questions, but they won't be in the same order. And unfortunately, you have to attempt all 69 questions again. You won't just attempt the questions that you got wrong in your previous attempts. I hope that answers your question, Celso. Prince Edward asks, is there any social media page where I can find the other lectures that I missed out on? He has just joined tonight. Yes, Prince Edward, I am posting the link to our YouTube channel right now. So you can go and click on there and you will find all 108 videos that we have posted. And you will be able to find close to the top those first 2 lectures. And as mentioned, tonight's lecture will be posted probably later tonight, but latest tomorrow morning. If you subscribe to our channel, there is an option for you to be notified whenever we post any video. So you don't have to wait for me to send the link on email the next day. As soon as it's posted, you will get notified automatically by YouTube. That's probably the best way to keep up to date with all our videos. Abdullah, Nanesh from the Netherlands asks if you could please explain Law 13, the innings, and in particular, point 13.3.5. I haven't got it open in front of me.
Yeah.
If you do, could you maybe please share your screen again and talk Nanesh through Law 13.3.5?
Yes, I can. It deals with completed innings. Let me just give me a second. Let me go to see my screen now. Let me know if you can see my screen, Tom.
Yes, I can.
Okay. So Nanes, 13.3.5 deals with when an innings is completed. There are 5 instances. This is the 5th one. And it says an innings is completed. The innings is done as soon as the prescribed overs has been bowled or the prescribed time has expired. To explain this, I need to go back to a few slides where it speaks, just give me a second, where it speaks about the number of innings. So the law allow for certain criteria to be put on when it comes to your innings. So currently in Test match cricket, there's no criteria. You can bat as long as you want, how many overs as you want. There's no limit in Test matches. But there are competitions across the world, including here in Cape Town a few years ago when we still played 2-day cricket, where the governing body put a playing condition in time because it was only 2-day. The game spans over 2 days. Both sides could bat in 2 innings, but because of time, they put a limit to the first innings. They said that each team can bat a maximum of 60 overs only in their first innings, and there's no limit in their second innings. So that is the playing condition that was put in place. So each side after, they can only bat a max of 60 overs in their first innings. So now to come back to the when is an innings completed and point number 5 in particular. So now point number 5 states, and if I'll use a game with this particular playing condition in place where you only allowed a max of 60 in your first innings. Let's say side A batted in their first innings and they get to 290 for the loss of 2 wickets, and the 60th over was just completed. So now the playing condition states that you only allowed a max of 60 in your first innings. So as soon as side A reached they completed their 60th over, yes, their score was on 290, yes, they only lost 2 wickets, but that innings is now completed because the playing condition or the agreement before the match was that you only allowed to face a max of 60 overs in your first innings. So side A, 290 for 2 after 60 overs. Their innings, yes, they were only 2 down, but according to the law, they were only allowed, according to this playing condition, a max of 60. So their innings is now completed. Side B will now have to go bat, and they in turn will only be allowed to bat a max of 60 overs. The second portion of point 5 speaks about prescribed time. here the playing condition put a number of overs to the innings, 60 in my example. You can also put a prescribed time to the innings. You can say that in this first innings, each side is only allowed to bat a max of 2 hours or 3 hours. As soon as they've batted 3 hours, the innings is then added in, the innings is then completed. Side B will now have to go bat. They allowed to bat a max of 3 hours. And after that 3 hours time has expired, then their innings is completed. Doesn't matter what the score is. So that is all that point 5 is trying to tell us. If there was an agreement to put certain limits on the innings, whether it's overs, whether it's time, as soon as that limit is reached, 60 overs in the example that I used, or 3 hours in the time example, soon as that limits are reached, the innings is then completed, irrelevant what the score is or how many wickets the side is down. Over, Tom.
Thanks.
Thank you, Abdullah, and thank you, Tom. This question is about the match between England and Zimbabwe when the scores were equal, and you mentioned the innings was not over, but is that because of the playing conditions the innings was not over because the time has reached, overs have been bowled, right? Because you mentioned the match was drawn, not a tie. Because the second innings, in this case, the time has been reached.
Nanesh, the time has been reached for the end of the day's play, and the overs have been reached for the end of the day's play. But that does not conclude the innings. Okay? Does that make sense? The end of the day had the number of overs for the day and the time for the day had been reached. But if we come to the end of day 4 and the overs for the day have been completed and the time for the day has been reached, does that terminate the innings?
No, in this case, either the prescribed number of overs have been bowled or the prescribed time has been reached. So in this case, the time has reached. So that's the last day of the match, test match, and the last hour probably, and the time has reached, right? So I was like, either unless otherwise it's specifically mentioned in the playing conditions, the law says the time has reached in that case, or else the next batsman would have come if there's enough time there.
Okay, Nanesh, you need to listen to me carefully. Okay?
Okay.
The end of the day had been reached. The time for the end of the day had been reached, and the overs for the day had been reached. But the innings, the time or the overs for the innings had not been reached. Does that make sense? That's why I gave you the example of if this was day 4 and we reached the end of the day in terms of time and in terms of overs, would the innings carry on the next day?
Yes, if it's a day 4, then definitely.
Okay, so my point is that the innings has not been completed. The day had been completed, but the innings had not been completed. There's a difference.
Yes, I completely agree.
Okay, so because the innings was not complete, that is why we have a draw and not a tie. I hope that clears your doubts.
Okay, now I open the playing conditions. In the playing conditions, there's no 13.3.5. Okay, that makes sense as well. Yeah. Clear.
Okay.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Abdullah.
Good. You're welcome. Abhishek has 3 questions. Abhishek, can we go through everybody else's questions first, and then we can leave your questions for last? So Prince Edward says, when I pass the level 1, is there an option to get to level 2 the same month? No, Prince Edward. Please watch the first 42 minutes of lecture number 1. It tells you how to get from level 1, level 2, and level 3. But in short, our next level 2 course will only take place after our season has ended. Our season in South Africa runs from the middle of September to the middle of April. So either late April or early May 2025, we will start level 2. So unfortunately, you will have to wait until then for level 2. Don't get too far ahead of yourself. Enjoy level 1. And also, once you've done level 1, you can start umpiring. You do not need to rush to level 2 and level 3. Remember that umpiring is a practical exercise. It is not just a theoretical discipline. So I'm glad that you're enjoying our course, but the purpose of the course is to get you guys out onto the field to umpire, not to study and get a master's in the laws of cricket. Next question is Sridhar. If a batter runs deliberately short, how can the umpire penalize him? Sridhar, I think the video was pretty clear on the penalties for running short deliberately. Abdullah, I'm going to ask you to take Sridhar's follow-on question, which says, if there is frequent deliberate short running to keep the strike by a batter, what would we as umpires do?
You will keep on applying the law, disallowing all runs, 5 penalty runs to the fielding side. And a last section of the law is you will report this matter to the governing body. So if the batters keep on deliberately run short, you will keep on punishing them with 5 penalty runs, disallowing all runs. But you will also report this to the governing body, and the governing body will then take appropriate action for this blatantly dishonest practice that the batters kept on doing. So you'll apply the law every time there is deliberate short running, and then afterwards the governing body needs to take appropriate action. Over, Tom.
Thanks, Tula. Prince Edward goes on to ask, are there by any chance coaching courses that we deliver? Prince Edward, we are umpires and umpire trainers. We do have Cricket South Africa colleagues who deliver coaching courses. All of them are face-to-face, and the email address that you need to send a message to if you are in South Africa is ghampo@cricket.co.za. I'll just put it into the chat box. You can ask Gary, Garry, that is his first name, when the next level 1 coaching course will be. And please mention where in South Africa you are, because he runs the coaching courses all over South Africa. Level 1, level 2, and level 3. But please note that they are very limited in spaces because all their courses are face-to-face, and they only have a limited number of courses per city. If you are not in South Africa, I only know of one online coaching course. I am putting the link to their website in the chat box. It is called Coach Ed, and it is run by none other than Gary Kirsten, the former South African opening batter. Will warn you that it is quite expensive. 95 US dollars is the first course that they offer, and they go up from there. Those are your options for coaching courses that I know of. Heinrich goes on to comment or ask on this: if the prescribed number of overs is completed, but the prescribed time. Ooh, Heinrich, if you are still on the call, please can you dictate your message? I'm going to read it as is. I'm not sure if it makes sense. On this, Heinrich, is that you?
Yes, it's me, Tom. Sorry, I'm busy at home here as well. Okay, so my question is this. So the prescribed number of overs is completed before the day's play is concluded. So there's still time left. Say, for example, there's 45 minutes or an hour left of the day's play, but the 90 prescribed overs for the day, for example, is completed. What happens then? Does the bowling side, are they allowed to bowl on to complete the time, or does the day's play end?
Good question, Heinrich. Abdullah, you want to take us through that one, referring to the playing conditions for Test match cricket, please?
Yes, Heinrich, there is a playing condition in place for Test match cricket. The first playing condition states that a minimum of 90 overs needs to be bowled per day. Minimum of 90. Also, there are times where that 90 overs needs to be bowled, let's say from 10 o'clock till 5 o'clock. So from 10 till 5, you need to bowl 90 overs minimum in the day. So if you do get to, let's say 4 o'clock, and you've bowled your 90, you have not reached your cessation time yet for the day, play needs to continue. You need to either have bowled your 90 and reach your cessation time for you to call time at the end of the day. If you bowled 90 and you haven't reached your cessation time, play needs to continue. A minimum of 90. A fielding side can bowl 200 overs in a day if they want to bowl 200 overs. All the playing condition states is they want a minimum of 90 to be bowled in a day, and you should not end earlier than your close of play, which in Test match cricket is 5 o'clock. Over, Tom.
Thanks, Dula. We can now go over to Abhishek Singh, who has been patient enough to wait until all other questions have been answered. Abhishek, you've got 3 questions for us. Please unmute your microphone and one question at a time.
Hi, Tom. Thank you for allowing me to put my questions. First question is that if deliveries are miscounted, if it's a 7th delivery, it's a no ball or boundary is scored or a wicket fell. So does they stand, or it is a dead ball and over is got completed?
Abhishek, so as mentioned in the law, the over as counted by the umpires will stand. So if you allow a 7th delivery to be bowled, whether it's a no ball, whether it's 6 runs, whether it's a wicket, those runs or that wicket will stand and will be scored in the scorebook. You cannot cancel them. It has happened. You allowed it to happen. It will be recorded and it will not be changed. I hope that
No,
answers
but
your
just
question.
immediately if it is, if an umpire realizes that just few seconds, 2 seconds back, I have made a mistake. That point I'm saying. Not the previous over. In the same over, if it's a 7 delivery, and if it's a no ball, wicket falls or run a score, and after the umpire gives his decision, can he revoke it and call it a dead ball and call the over completed?
No, Abhishek, it cannot be revoked. You will not call dead ball. If you allow it to be bowled, it will stand. Whether it is a no ball, whether it is a wide, whether it's a boundary, whether it is a wicket, because you allowed it to be bowled, it will stand. Even if you realize it immediately after the batter has played the shot, the ball will stand.
Okay. My second question would be, can I go?
Yeah,
Can I
go.
complete my? Yeah. Suppose 9 wickets are down of a batting side. An over is in progress from a, suppose say take from pavilion end, and the 10th wicket fell of the, and so inning is completed. So can the next bowling side, which was batting, can they start their innings to bowl from the pavilion end, or they have to bowl it from other end? Means can they choose their bowling end in the next inning, or
I'm sure you know the answer to that question, Abhishek. It's a very straightforward answer.
means they can choose from wherever they want?
Correct. The first over of any innings can be bowled from either end. The bowling side will have the opportunity to choose who bowls the first over and which end it is bowled from, regardless of where the last over of the previous innings was bowled from. Okay,
Okay. And my last, if you allow me,
sure.
it is regarding the awarding of match, the situation.
Mhm.
I will take an example because I was not clear how it was awarded. Uh, I know how it was awarded, but how it went down in the record books. It was, if you remember, 1996, India playing Sri Lanka at home, the semi-final, World Cup semi-final, 96 World Cup semi-final. So India were 8 down for some 135 runs. It was a very tough situation for being an Indian fan then. Then the crowd started pelting stones. They set some part of the stands to fire, and the play could not continue.
Yeah.
But I think it was because it was home side. India was playing in Eden Gardens then, so it was awarded to Sri Lanka. But the line which was written at the bottom was Sri Lanka wins by default. So is it a kind of awarding a match, or I don't know why they wrote that. I was 10 years, so then I couldn't understand then what does it mean by that Sri Lanka win by default for 96 World Cup semi-final. Though equation it clearly said that India could not win that, but it was written because play could not continue.
Abdullah, do you remember that match and the awarding thereof?
No, I was also still a teenager. No, I don't. The only thing I can think of is there must have been something added in the playing conditions that covers if games get interrupted by the crowd or anything. This will
Yeah,
be
it was
the
because of
outcome.
crowd. It was because of the crowd. So they wrote Sri Lanka win by default.
That was a playing condition that was added for that particular competition, i.e. the World Cup, and that's why the result was stated, right? Because the playing condition stated if because the game was disrupted by the crowd, the Sri Lanka wins by default. That's the only thing I can think of. Overtime.
My purpose of quoting this example because in see at international levels these things rarely happens, but when you umpire at club levels or below that, there are many instances where crowd tends to run to the field. So so I think visitor teams are given the benefit of this situation, or how things are dealt in these cases? Because there are chances that play may not go on.
Sandeep, I will use Western Province Cricket Association as an example. So we have a local leagues committee who will decide the outcome of such incidents. So the umpires would typically send a report as to what transpired, why the match had to be stopped or called off. And based on the information received from the umpires and from both teams, then the local leagues committee will decide whether they award the match to the away side or whether they order a replay to take place at a different venue, or whether they decide the match based on Duckworth Lewis, depending on if enough overs had been played by both sides. So there's nothing in the laws that says a result is known as a default to a particular side. So as Abdullah mentioned, that was probably in the playing conditions or the bylaws for the World Cup. And for our local cricket, those decisions are made by the governing body for that particular match or tournament. And I'm sure where you umpire, there is a governing body as well. And you as umpires shouldn't be forced to make the decision. But yes, in general, the home team is usually punished for the misbehavior of the crowd. But that is not a hard and fast rule. It needs to be in the bylaws, playing conditions for that particular match or tournament for it to be applied. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah. Bit clear. Thank you, Tom.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Abhishek. Next hand up is Sandeep. Sandeep, you are unmuted. The floor is yours.
I do not have a question, Tom, but just an extension to the answer for the Abhishek's first question related to the seventh ball of the over. I think he was also mentioning about, you realize that after the ball has been bowled, you realize that you have allowed seventh ball to bowl. But the extension to that was, if that seventh ball is no ball or a wide ball, you do not allow to bowl one more ball to cover up the no ball. The moment that you realize that the seventh ball has been bowled, irrespective of the outcome of that seventh ball, the over should be get called if you realize that. Just an extension to that.
Thanks, Sandeep, and good afternoon to you in Atlanta, there in the US.
Good evening to you too.
That indeed was part of the lecture this evening, that if that seventh realize that it was the seventh ball of the over, you will not allow the ball to be rebowled. You will call over. There's been a new question from Prince Edward. He says, can you please explain the Proteas game this year, I think around June, that made them go to the finals? Was that ball caught or was it a boundary? Prince Edward, I think you're talking about the final against India, the T20 World Cup final, South Africa against India, where David Miller hit the ball towards the boundary, and it was caught, as the record books have recorded it, caught by Surya Kumar Yadav, and essentially won India the World Cup. A lot of debate around that catch, whether he had touched the rope or not. Prince Edward, we actually went into a lot of detail on that particular catch before or at the start of a level 2 lecture in June. I do have it somewhere. I'm going to share that particular link to that particular lecture, and the first half an hour is Abdullah explaining the laws of boundary catches and also the technology available to a TV umpire to make a decision as to whether a ball is caught or a boundary 6 is scored. So take the time. I've just posted the link to watch that first 30 minutes of that lecture, Prince Edward, and you can come back to us tomorrow and tell us what you think, if that was a catch or if that was a boundary 6. Whatever we feel or whatever you think, the trophy is safe in the hands of the Board of Control for Cricket in India. So that is the result of that particular final. A win to India by, I think it was 5 runs at the end. But yeah, a lot of good debate around that particular catch. Right. So, of course, all the Indians are going to say caught and all the South Africans are going to say boundary 6, such as the banter amongst cricket fans around the world. Ladies and gents, I don't see any more questions in the chat box, and I don't see any more hands up in the meeting room. So I'll take this opportunity to thank you all for your attendance and your interaction. We will meet again, same time, same place, same Microsoft Teams meeting link tomorrow. Note that I unfortunately do not have time to send reminders on WhatsApp to all 450 of you that have registered for the course. So I just send email reminders, but with the same link that you have used for the first 3 lectures. So have a good evening further. Thank you for your attendance. See you tomorrow. Cheers. Bye-bye.